Thank you very much for joining us. We are live webcasting today, so can I please remind members to use their microphones, and please can members remind me to use my microphone, because I think that'll probably be needed, and remember to turn them off when not speaking. Item 1, if Amelia...
I've just sent her a message to see.
Okay.
I think just continue.
Right, okay. Item 1, to note any apologies for absence. We have Councillor De Winter and Councillor Cooper, who have given their apologies prior to this meeting. Councillor Eadie will be joining us on M&S Teams, and we have Councillor Oram and panel substituting this afternoon. As I say, apologies have been received from Councillor Cooper, who is the Vice Chair of this committee. Can I ask for nominations for a Vice Chair, please? Councillor Dennis?
I'd like to nominate Samantha Penfold, please.
Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much. Councillor Penfold, would you like to come up and join me? And you'll see that Councillor Penfold has got a very Christmassy jumper on. Thankfully, it doesn't, if you press anything, we don't have music. Item 2, we've all received the minutes of a committee meeting which was held on the 5th of October 2023. Our committee members happy to accept those as a true record of those minutes. Councillor Birch.
Yes, it shows that I did attend the last meeting. I don't believe Councillor Brazil did so. I think there's a typo there. I think it should be myself rather than Councillor Brazil.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birch. Any other questions or comments before we accept those minutes? Councillor Dennis.
I'm happy that they're accurate reflection of the meeting, but it was just wanted to make a point about one of the outstanding actions on it. So shall I do that now? Or?
Please.
So one of the actions was that we requested a list of outside bodies that the council engages with, and we have yet to receive that, but I believe Mr. Powell has an answer to that question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've the ongoing saga of partners. We're going to update the list of partners. At the moment, we've got a definition between partners, people we procure services from, and contractors. We're going to update that list of partners, as it were, provided to the committee, and hopefully that will cover the main people we engage with and allow the committee to determine who they might want to invite to future meetings.
Are you happy with that answer, Councillor Dennis?
Yes, I am. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any committee members have any declarations of interest they want to let us have? I assume that's no. Item 5, we had no members of the public raise any questions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have had questions from the members of the public for our item on the Environment Agency and South West Water, which will be raised at that time. Now moving to item 6, the Executive Forward Plan. Does councillors have any issues, comments on that, please? Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, I just noted that there's one item written in red, and I wondered what the significance of that was.
Mr. Molyneux?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I can answer that. So that item was an item that we were thinking was going to get brought forward, but probably isn't. So it is. Let me just see. Get to a date on my list. Oh, the Joint Local Plan Review. Mr. Powell, do you know why that's in red? Because that's not the one item that I saw in red last time. Joint local plan review to consider a report that provides an update on the joint local plan. I think I'm not aware that that's still on the agenda.
No, I think it was provisionally put on, but I don't think it's going to be on the final version. It will be circulated, but we can confirm that back to the committee. The process is sometimes items get put on there for consideration by the leader and by the executive, but I don't believe that one's made the final cut, but we will confirm. Thank you, Chair.
And you'll email all members of that after this meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else on the forward plan? Okay, thank you very much. Now, moving forward to item 7, which is the bulk of really today's meeting. Can we welcome Alan Burrows, Charlotte Bacon and Clarissa Newell to the meeting from the Environment Agency South West Water. Perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourselves and obviously give us our brief 5-minute presentation. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, gentlemen and ladies. I think we decided that you could have whatever you wished.
Environment Agency first.
Ladies always come first.
So hello everybody, my name's Clarissa Newell. I'm the Area Environment Manager for Water, Land and Biodiversity for Devon, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. I have been working for the Environment Agency 20 years this year, and seeing as it's Christmas, I did want to just start off my presentation with a touch of positivity, because I think on this subject it can feel very negative. So in the 20 years that I've worked for the Environment Agency, due to the kind of robust regulation from the Environment Agency, but also investment from the water company, we have seen a huge improvement in water quality over those 20 years, with much less phosphorus and ammonia in the water, which has led to an increase in invertebrates in our watercourse. And also we've had much reduced serious incidents over the last 20 years from the water companies. Our bathing waters are the best that they have been, and 20 years ago they wouldn't have even met the kind of minimum standards. So I do try to remind myself that we are on a journey, but it is absolutely time to shift gear. The public have made it incredibly clear that the systems that we have in place at the moment for water quality are not enough. And we are, as the Environment Agency, responding to that in how we regulate. So we continue to regulate. We have really robust action for industry that fails to obey the rules. We clean up incidents, and we also monitor our environment so that we can understand where the river catchments are, which rivers, which watercourses really need our attention and action. We are improving habitat, and we are influencing policy to enable us to have better tools for regulation. So what's coming up? How are the Environment Agency going to change in the future? So we are looking at expanding our specialised workforce across the country, which will have more of a focus on detailed audits and looking at data. We've got the water companies now having so much more monitoring going on, so we can really understand what's going out rather than having to be everywhere to see everything. We're increasing compliance checks, and we are transforming huge quantities of monitoring data into stronger regulatory intelligence, which we're working on at the moment. I've got up there on the slide for you to just have a little read through while we're going through what our responsibilities are, but you can see what those are there. So if I could just move on to the next slide. So what is the state of the South Hams River? So you've got 17 bathing waters, all of which are rated at excellent, except for the one at Mothercombe, which is good. The pressures in the catchment are actually from majority from agriculture as well as other sources from industry. And you can see there that you've got 43 in the good category, 51 in the moderate and 6 in poor. This is really not representative of the rest of the country. You're actually in a really good position as far as quality of water is concerned. And I think in some ways that goes against you, because when we're trying to, as a manager, when I'm trying to prioritise where we put our attention, we are nationally encouraged to put our attention to those water bodies that need our attention, are in a poor water quality status. So as area environment manager, I have to have a think around, can I influence nationally? Because we also don't want our good rivers to degrade either. So we're constantly having a look around what's the best way to prioritise. There is a slide on the next one which just gives you a kind of comparison of where your water quality sits compared to England and then Devon and Cornwall as well. So you can see 43 for good status is actually really great, and yeah, that's a good thing. So that's some good news. Sorry, next slide. So enforcement, we have a team of, so I have 3 land and water teams that do work very tirelessly to make sure that we are enforcing. So we are currently investigating incidents that took place at Brigbury and considering our response to that. We have got enforcement action taking place for sites around the River Yelm, which was from the mine and quarry sector. And I think it's just worth highlighting that my 3 land and water teams, so I have 10 in the west, 7 officers in central kind of Devon, Cornwall, Plymouth area, and 7 in the east. They are, working really hard, but not just on water company. That's quarries, that's private industry. So that's not many officers for a very large amount of discharges and permits that we regulate. And then also there's been the incident in Wembury, which we're also investigating. So I think I just want to manage expectations. Obviously, with the Environment Agency doing investigations, we can't go into lots of detail on some sites. And hopefully you will have heard back in April, we had a number of cases brought to the Magistrates Court where we got over 2.1 million in fines to us. And also the year before, we had the International Paints case file coming through too, and we will be having more case files coming through next year. Okay, next slide. So reporting to the public, a lot of, I think the focus today has been through understanding what's available and FOIs, so freedom of information requests that come through. There's lots of information online, and I've just got some statements there that I wanted to kind of make clear. So we've got our online tool Swimfo providing information. We're working with local authorities to help them make decisions on posting signs. And we don't warn and inform for permitted spills, but South West Water does. Event duration monitoring EDM data is available online, and I have shared those links there so that people can take a look. Okay, next one. Shall I switch it off and on again? I think, oh, that might be the end of it, is it? I have got some extra slides on. Shall I switch off and switch on again?
We think we know the problem.
You are not allowed to unmute. To raise your hand, press *5.
So the only extra slide that I thought I might have on the end there was what the duties of Ofwat are. So I think sometimes there's just a little bit of confusion over which what responsibility lies with who. So I have got an extra slide, which I think is there somewhere, detailing those. But that is around ensuring that the customer gets that correct bills basically, and I've got bullet points there. So I think that's probably my 5 minutes.
Can we thank you very much for that? We assume that these slides will be available to all members, and we assume that they'll go on the Southampton District Council website as well following this meeting. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So before we start, let's learn how to do that. So my name's Alan Burrows.
We met down at Warfleet, a beautiful summer's day last summer.
Yes, indeed. And we met with Councillor as well down at South Milton last week as well. So Alan Burrows, I'm Director of External Liaison, and I used to work for the Environment Agency. I was at the Environment Agency for 32 years. I joined South West Water nearly 3 years ago with a remit to help South West Water understand how it can reduce pollution incidents, and we'll come on to that in a moment. I'll introduce my colleague Mark.
I'm Mark Worsfold. I'm Director of Asset Management at South West Water. I've been in the water industry for 35 years, and in full disclosure terms, I also used to work for Ofwat. So there we go.
Okay, so first of all, apologies. Jay Harris, our Wastewater Services Operations Manager, was due to be here today, but to ensure that we comply with our service level agreements, he's currently attending an incident in Tor Bay, which I'm hoping to receive a call back in about 2 hours on. So apologies that he's not here. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So just wanted to, in discussions with Steve, I'm going to cover kind of three main topics: pollutions and storm overflow monitoring, implications of climate change, and something around local communities and households, with a particular reference on customer bills and support that we provide as well. So just a little bit about South West Water itself. So next slide, please. Sorry. It's like a COVID presentation, doesn't it? So a bit of an overview of South West Water. South West Water is sits under the Pennon Group. Pennon Group also own Bournemouth Water and Bristol Water, as well as Pennon Power and Pennon Water Services. But South West Water, in its own right, is the organisational company that provides you with your water and sewage services in South Hams. Bit of perspective on some of our network. We've got 19,000 kilometres of sewerage network in our company. Most of it is underground. We've got 653 sewage treatment works and well over 800 sewage pumping stations on the wastewater side. We also have an equivalent of pipelines for the clean water side as well. Currently employ around about 2,500 employees, and part of our commitment as part of the PR24 plan is to increase the employment by an additional 2,000 FTEs as we go out to ask people to help us deliver our plan for 2025 to 2030. So next slide, please. In terms of pollutions and storm overflow monitoring, what I'd just like to say is in our WaterFit strategy, we are clearly making a commitment to reduce the number of storm overflow operations by 2025 and then progressively up to 2040, which is actually 10 years ahead of the government target of 2050. And my colleague Mark will add a bit more flavour to that as we go through the conversations. We also have 151 bathing waters within our patch, and Clarissa's already stolen my thunder in so much as this year DEFRA announced that all bathing waters in Devon and Cornwall met the required standard for bathing water quality, apart from one in Cornwall. And that one beach is where South West Water has no assets whatsoever. So it was primarily catchment runoff that was the issue on that particular beach. And that beach is Porthlooney. And then finally, we have made a commitment to reduce the number of serious pollutions, i.e. those that the Environment Agency categorise as Cat 1 and 2 to zero by 2025. And I'll show you some of those statistics in a moment. I just wanted to talk about what is a storm overflow, because I think sometimes it's a little bit confusing to some as to what the purpose of the storm overflows are. Primarily, they're there to stop premises from flooding. So the storm overflow will operate when our system gets inundated. We cannot discharge into the environment unless we meet the requirements of a permit that the Environment Agency give us. And that is why the Environment Agency currently, along with Ofwat, undertaking an investigation of not only South West Water, but other water companies in England. I won't be able to say anything more than that about the investigation because it's the Environment Agency's investigation and Ofwat's investigation. But suffice to say that we are working closely to ensure that we provide them with the information they need in order to conclude their investigations. So I know there's a lot of emotion around storm overflows, but they are there for a purpose, and I thought it would be helpful just to explain they're there primarily to stop premises from flooding during periods of heavy rain. So if we can move on to the next slide. I thought it would be helpful to set some of the progress that we made into context. So in 2020, the Environment Agency reported that South West Water had 225 pollution incidents in its region. For South Hams, there were 27. So 225 overall, 27. Then in 2021, we had 151, 18 in South Hams. In 2022, we had 108, 16 in South Hams. Last year, we were the second lowest number of pollution incidents as an absolute number across all water and sewage companies in England. There were no serious pollution incidents in South Hams over that period. And as you can see, over that period as well, we had 3 in 2020, 8 in 2021, 2 in 2022. And currently, we believe there is only one serious pollution incident that we have had in 2023.
Do you want to try and continue? I think we're okay.
Yeah, I'll continue. So,
Councillor Hopwood, can you go on mute, please, Nikki?
I didn't like to ask.
I am on mute. I've just unmuted myself to speak to you.
Oh,
It's not showing that you're muted, that's all.
thank you, Councillor Hopwood.
So that's the progress that we made on pollution. So there has been a significant improvement in pollution numbers. This year, it's likely to see a slight uptick in pollution numbers because we've had extremely wet weather this year compared to the historical average. And that does pose a number of issues regarding our ability to maintain our network and make sure that it operates in the way that we would like. The storm overflows, we actually had 100% monitoring of all of our storm overflows in December last year. We've got 1,342 storm overflows, and we have 1,342 event duration monitors on those storm overflows. So for the first time ever, we now know what's happening on our network. Some of those EDMs have confirmed what we know. Some of those EDMs have told us things that we didn't know. But ultimately, we have information now on which we can act, and we have met a number of colleagues around this room in a number of locations around South Hams to explain some of that information. The next step is, now we've got all of our monitors in place, is to publish that information in near real time. We are currently in conversations with a number of stakeholders, and we plan to provide that information in near real time of all of our storm overflows in early January. Again, that's ahead of the government target. Government set us a target of March 2025. We are focusing on storm overflows, and I think I'll probably leave that conversation to a little bit later. But our overall strategy under WaterFit is to get down to an average of no more than 20 spills for our storm overflows overall, and those that are in or near bathing waters to an average of 10 spills by 2025. So that's quite an ambitious program. And then beyond that, we have got another program to reduce further up to 2040. Clarissa's stolen my thunder in terms of bathing water quality. I mean, you've got really excellent bathing water quality down here in South Hams, and I would be really pleased if I saw this out of your 17 beaches, 16 met excellent, and they didn't just meet excellent, they met excellent really well. We do know that Mothercombe was good, not excellent, but it's been good for a period of time. We had a conversation as well about signage at bathing waters, and I think there's a specific question that's come up that we received 2 or 3 days ago, so we'll come on to that later if we may. Then finally, river water quality. Again, Clarissa's explained the what river water quality looks like for South Hams, so I'll just move on if I may. The next slide is what else are we doing? It's not all about hard engineering. We're doing a lot on other things, improving the knowledge in our network. So we are installing 9,000 sewer level monitors by March of next year, with the aim of installing 27,000 overall by March 25. That's to enable us to work out how our sewers are operating. All of that data will feed very cleverly into some sort of AI solutions. I'm not an IT person, but this data will enable us to almost run our network in near real time, which will be a lot more easier for us to manage and operate. We also work with yourselves as planning authorities in terms of planning developments, but we also do a lot of nature-based solution work as well, where we're working upstream in a number of catchments to look at how we can slow the flow, how we can put nature-based solutions in that aren't carbon intensive, so reed beds, etc., on some of our treatment works, instead of doing hard engineering as well. And South Milton was an example that we showed Councillor last week in terms of the impact that it can have. And then there's some other things around customer behaviour, you know, the Love Your Loo, Think Sink campaigns. Hope you've all eaten, but pee, poo and paper is the only thing we should be putting down the toilet, nothing else. It's amazing how many plastic McDonald's toys and bits of ladder and bike and motorbike we find in our sewerage system. It's quite amazing, actually. And I always say it's a little bit like driving a diesel car. You've probably seen somebody at a garage has suddenly thought, I've just put petrol in a diesel car, or vice versa. Exactly the same thing. Our sewage system is built to take pee, poo and paper and nothing else. And I think we can all help manage the implications, etc., by doing that. In terms of misconnections, we also know that when there are new developments or developments that where people extend houses, sometimes they don't connect into the right place, and we end up having misconnections that occur. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, I'm brutally honest, but where we do have a report of one, either from the Environment Agency directly or from a member of the public, we do go out and investigate. Next slide, if I may. This is just an example of where we're doing nature-based solutions across our patch. I'll let you have a look at that in your own time, but it's not just about one place, it's a number of places where we're looking. And you'll also see that we're also managing our sites for invasive species. So one of the questions I think that came up recently was, do you manage Himalayan balsam? Yes, we do. And we can come on to that specific question in a moment. Implications of climate change. You know, we are facing it now. Next slide, please. More extreme weather events, hotter and drier summers. So we had the hottest, driest summer last year in around about 150 years. This year has been 45% wetter than average. So we're flip-flopping between various climate conditions. We will also have to deal with rising sea levels as well, because a number of our assets are around the coast, and we will need to deal with that. But we also have to face the challenge of a growing population. The way that we manage that, next slide please, is through a number of strategic programs. One is the Water Industry National Environment Programme, or WINEP, and that's based on evidence that the Environment Agency collect through their monitoring.
Can I just ask, are there many more slides? I'm
Yeah,
sorry to ask that because we've got an awful lot of questions.
Yeah, there are three more. I'm trying to answer the questions that were also raised in the
I
Q&A
appreciate
that came
that.
out on Tuesday. So if you bear with me, that'll be excellent. Thank you. We also have a water industry strategic direction statement called WISER, which the Environment Agency and Natural England provide us with. And there's also direction and policy from government. One of those specific things, next slide, is on water resources. There was a question around the water resources and what we're doing. We have just closed a consultation on our water resources management plan. We are, as of today or tomorrow, completing a statement of responses, which will in effect describe what our water resource management plan will look like for the next 5 years. And the primary focus on that is to protect and enhance the environment. And what that might mean for South Hams is that we are going to have to reduce some of the abstraction that we take on the Dart in order to protect the environment within the Dart as well. Next slide, please. 2 more to go and then I'm done. Implications for climate change. You will be able to see on our website what we're saying in our water resources management plan. But for South Hams particularly, South Hams is primarily provided through our Roadford zone. Roadford is a primary strategic reservoir. Suffice to say, we try to connect as much of our reservoirs together, so your water might not actually come from Avon, it might come from another place. Depends on the quality of the water and whether or not we need to blend the water over time to reduce the cost of the treatment in order to get it to you in your taps to the quality that we are required to do by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. Finally, on local communities and households, there was a specific question around household bills. Our PR24 plan provides some information on that, but in essence, we're expecting bills to rise on average by £3 a month in 2025 to rise to £9 a month by 2030. That's subject to Ofwat agreeing our plans, and it's currently with Ofwat, and I think we hear it initially in March, April next year. Is that right, Mark? May, June. Okay. And then finally, the other things we do with local communities is we do go out to a lot of community events. I spent 4 evenings with Anthony Magnall meeting a number of the constituencies at 4 locations around South Hams. We also attend scrutiny committee meetings. We also meet with councillors on site to talk about specific issues. Charlotte attends many community meetings in and around the area to discuss issues, particularly at a parish council level as well. So there's a lot of community engagement. I will stop there, but hopefully that will cover some of the questions that came through as well.
Can I thank you very much for that presentation? I think perhaps our communications team should perhaps put these slides out, because there's an awful lot of detail on those slides, awful lot of information, and I think we all should like to share that with our residents. We've asked you obviously to be here because the water quality of the South Hams is a big issue, and the flooding of our areas is a big issue with our residents, and that's why you're here. And can we thank you very much for that? We have a number of questions that our Environment Agency and South West Water Task and Finish Group put together, and we, if that's okay with your good selves, we will now go out to ask those. Councillor Oram, you've got questions on river and beaches, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, thank you all for attending today, and thank you for your presentations. Can I ask, in terms of rivers and beaches, how regularly is bathing water tested, and if high levels of contamination are found, what work is undertaken to reduce or stop contamination in those areas, please?
So we regularly monitor the bathing waters. I am the manager for the regulation side. We haven't got our bathing waters manager here. I think I'm right in saying that is every week that it's that they are monitored, and they're very fine-tuned tests that will really go into a lot of detail and analysed by our lab. We use that information to model what's going on in the catchment, and then we work to influence the water companies on where investment could be needed according to what that data is showing us.
So shall I just add to that? So it's true to say that if there is an impact on a particular bathing water, it may not be the water company that's caused the impact. We do know that there is urban diffuse runoff. We do know that there are inputs from agriculture. We do know that there are inputs from other sources. That is why some local authorities choose to ban dogs during the bathing season, because dog feces is highly potent compared to human feces. So is bird feces. So there are a number of sources of E. coli, and I'm not a chemist or a biologist, intestinal enterococci, I'm going to call it, i.e. those things that can cause stomach upsets. If we have instances where there are high readings, we do in some instances undertake additional monitoring. We will particularly look at our assets to see if they've caused a problem. And in some circumstances, we will undertake something called microbial source tracing, which looks at whether or not it's come from a human source, bovine source, canine source, avian source, or other sort of source, in order to determine the high level of E. coli.
Thank you very much for that. Do you have a supplementary, or is...
Just another question, Chair, if that's okay. What are the testing procedures for testing water quality? I know you touched on it very briefly there, but could you explain a little bit more about how that actually happens on a weekly basis?
So we have bathing water samplers that travel around to all of the beaches all throughout the bathing water season, and they will take those samples back for analysis. which is then entered onto our kind of data collection system, which then feeds our environmental planning team on what we need to influence for the future, basically. I'm afraid I can't go into exactly what determinants beyond what Alan has just gone through, but there's definitely information on gov.uk around how that system works.
Councillor Preswell, do you just want to quickly come in?
Thank you.
Microphone, please.
Apologies. You say the water is tested weekly. Are the positions changed every so often, or is it always in the same place?
It's always in the same place so that you've got that same history of data going forward.
Is there a time when you decide to maybe choose to change? I understand it's probably where there's a convolution of streams, etc., but
not to my knowledge, I am not in my talking in my area of expertise for exact grid reference of where they are, but my understanding is we will test in the same area each time so that we get that consistent data, and it's not influenced by any other geographical factor that could happen if you were doing it in different locations.
Do you know if that's reviewed? There might be more more buildings going on, etc., and more development.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Boas, did you want to come back in quickly?
And the point I would just make is that the sampling is taken throughout the bathing season. We are at the moment doing pilot work jointly between the Environment Agency and South West Water about monitoring a number of beaches outside the bathing season as well, to see how effectively that can be deployed into the future, because many people swim outside the bathing season.
They certainly do on the River Dart, I know that. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Panel, you've got some questions on reservoirs. Can I say I'm really pleased you're here, because I know you had a date with Anne Widdicombe this morning, which I sincerely hope your party realises he's been talking to the other side this morning.
It was I think it might have been a different.
I've made him speechless.
Okay. Yes, I've got a couple of questions that I'll run together because they are linked, which is about reservoirs and water resources. We've got the two biggest. We don't have many reservoirs in the South Hams. I think I've got the two biggest in my ward at the Avon Dam and Venford. I'd like to ask if you've got any plans for more reservoirs, and hopefully not on Dartmoor, and if so, where they might be. And what are you doing in the long term to address the problem of water shortages? We've suffered quite a long hosepipe ban in part of the South Hams over the last year. Obviously, climate change is going to take more of a toll, and safeguarding our water supply and making enough water available is the key thing. What are you doing to address those issues?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on, we've just consulted on a water resource management plan, and we've received a number of responses to that. As a result of that, we have to then pull together a statement of response, which is our final water resources management plan. That will be available in early January, and what that will look at are three main things. Is there a need for a new resource anywhere in the Southwest region? The answer is yes, we are creating new resources. Blackpool Pit is one in Cornwall. We are developing a desalination plant to manage peak demand. It won't be running all the time, and Mark will be able to explain that a little bit more in a little bit more detail. And we're also looking at other resources as well. We're not developing anything new on Dartmoor, but what we are doing, as well as developing those resources in the Southwest region, we're also looking at how do we encourage people to reduce their demand. We found in 2022, what year are we in now, 2023, last year, demand was excessive. It was higher than it's ever been. We were providing more drinking water than we'd ever provided before. And one of the things that the Environment Agency will also require us to do, as well as DEFRA, is what are you doing to make sure that we can reduce demand as well? We're trying to reduce the per capita consumption of an individual down to a certain level. I mean, that is the right thing to do. And I remember at meeting with Anthony Magnor, I remember saying as a youngster I used to share the bathwater with my brothers every Sunday, but now I can probably have 3 or 4 showers a day if I want to. So, you know, behaviours do change, but we also need to think about how those behavioural changes impact demand. The other thing that we're doing as part of PR24 is going further on leakage, not only on our own network, but there's a large amount of leakage that happens on customer property as well. So we need to address that. So, Mark, if I missed anything.
The only thing I would add is that we're also doing water resource planning, not just for the South West Water region, but we also are looking across the wider South West. Both Bristol Water and Bournemouth Water are also part of the Pennon Group, and we're also working very closely with Wessex Water and developing new resources that can then be moved across the whole of the South West Water region, and that includes a new reservoir at well, calling it Cheddar 2, so it is near Bristol, that is being developed, and then that water would be able to be transferred across the whole region.
Thank you very much.
Just very quickly, do you know what percentage of water is lost through leakage?
We do. I don't know the answer. If we could make a note of that, we'll get back to you.
Thank you very much. That would be.
So you also need a permit from the Environment Agency to abstract water as well as discharge into water, and we, as part of that application process, we will really make sure that that abstraction doesn't interfere with the environment. So understanding what they're doing about leakage and reduction of use for the customer is really, really important, but also what is the impact of taking water from other areas, what's the impact on wildlife. So yeah, that we take that permit application system really, really seriously, and have a lot in at the moment that we are assessing.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Callaghan, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, hi, I'm the environmental health lead on the council. Just a couple of ones. I think you mentioned, South West Water mentioned earlier about some figures on the water bills increase residents are going to be facing come April. I wonder if it can be stated what percentage that's likely to be, and how it can be justified in the context of the raising of the dividend by over 10% by, I think it was the parent company Pennon, despite the fine, for example, of South West Water of over £2 million for dumping sewage in our rivers and seas. And also, second question is, can South West Water comment on the investigation by Ofwat into whether South West Water is accurately reporting leaks and the volume of water used by customers? Thank you.
So there were 3 questions in that. Thanks. In terms of providing a percentage, I mean, there are pros and cons on there, because people don't work in percentages, they work in pounds, shilling and pence in old money. It all depends on the water usage as well. So you may have a family that is a very low water usage, they have a meter, there may be an individual in a property. We try to talk about money because that's what we believe money, people understand money than percentages. So that's the answer to that question. The question around the £2.1 million fines, I mean, no pollution is a good pollution. Those incidents did happen over 4 or 5 years ago. They're historic cases that the Environment Agency brought against ourselves, and we have learned from that. And you will have seen in the presentation that I gave that the number of serious pollution incidents have actually reduced, and we're aiming towards a target of 0 by 2025. And we've only had 1 serious pollution incident in the South West Water region this year. So that is also good news. And forgive me, I can't remember the third question.
You don't have a percentage increase then, roughly? It's quite hard to gauge. Right, okay.
No, I don't have it on me.
I think the question was reporting on leaks.
All right. The other question was to do with the Ofwat investigation into the accurate reporting of leaks.
That is under investigation, and we cannot comment on that.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Eadie and Councillor McKay, the questions that you have got, can we go through the Overviewing Scrutiny's working groups
I agree,
questions
yeah,
first, because some of those questions that you may be raising may actually be already on the agenda. So
on the list.
if
No,
we
that's
could
fine,
do
Chair.
that, so
Fine. I'll
we
wait.
we will be back. Councillor Penfold, you have got flooding. Can you ask both questions at the same time, please?
Yeah, due to climate changes, we're having significant amounts of flooding, particularly affecting our area. So what are you doing to address this? Right, and that's the first bit. What flooding controls do you have in place, such as reflooding fields and planting to help clean the water? Okay.
So sorry, I feel like I'm saying this quite a lot of times. Flooding is definitely not my remit, but I can give you the kind of strap line on what we're doing there. So one of the things for the Southwest is the Environment Agency is very much driven by how many properties can be protected. And in the Southwest, we have lots of smaller towns and villages that are at risk from flooding, but that don't have that big kind of population or numbers of houses that you're protecting. One of the things that's really important for Devon and Cornwall, and Devon in particular, is you've got very steep catchments where flooding can happen incredibly quickly. And the way to address that is through natural solutions, educating on land use and agricultural use. And that links to water quality too. So the Environment Agency's Flood and Coastal Risk Management Department are working very closely with my department on how to work with landowners to make sure that we hold the water higher up in the catchments through projects of encouraging more tree growth, looking at how water moves through the catchment, rewilding streams, and tackling it that way. We do have projects going on as well, and some, that will be a combination of natural solutions with the kind of, traditional concrete flood defence that you'll have in your mind. Does that answer your question? I think there was a second part.
That's part of it, but I think we come back to the Southwest Water. Yeah, so they need to answer that as well. What are you specifically doing? So I'm thinking of areas like Compton, which is quite regularly flooded, which is really unpleasant for them.
So on sewer flooding, we actually have one of the best performances in the industry around sewer flooding with one of the lowest levels. But ultimately, as you say, for customers, sewer flooding is one of the worst things that can happen. So we continue to drive forward and make improvements on sewer flooding. The money that we are about to be spending on storm overflows, where we're spending over, we've estimated the total cost of the storm overflow programme of just over £1 billion over the next 5 years. And that will be there to target, and will continue to target, reductions in surface water and other elements of water entering the sewer, and reduce those down. At the same time, we will also drive down sewer flooding as we look at each of those catchments and address both the issues and reduce storm overflow spills, but also sewer flooding spills at the same time in those catchments. So that's where the programme is going to be. Now, we've looked at that, and we've looked very hard at to what level should that be reflected in customer bills, and what level do we feel that should be funded. And so in our programme of over £1 billion, we've actually only sought to have around 800 million reflected in customer bills going forward. And we've driven and set aside a whole series of efficiencies in that process as well. But the programme itself will address both storm overflows and make improvements in sewer flooding to offset both climate change, urban creep, and things of that nature. And a lot of those solutions will be both nature-based and what we're calling blue solutions. So you've green solutions, blue solutions, which is about removing surface water, finding other pathways for that water to go. And actually that's the space where we all need to work together, because a lot of those pathways have been put in place over many, many years. And what we need to do is take it out of a combined sewer and put it into another pathway, a stream or a river, so that it has a better pathway to the sea that doesn't mix with raw sewage, and therefore doesn't cause problems of sewer flooding and or spills to the environment through overflows.
Councillor Penfold, you've got one more question?
No, just to do with that. So can we find information where you've got evidence of doing these things?
Of doing that work together?
Yes,
yes, we've been doing that work in a number of different localities that both across the region where we've been taking that surface water out. And we've got a number of cases where it is very much plumbed in. So, for instance, you probably don't know this, but Bazalgette designed all of the sewers in Torquay, and at the time he plumbed all the rivers and all the streams into a tunnel system that used to go off Hope's Nose at Torquay. We're now looking at how can we separate those and how do we work with Torquay to actually separate those rivers back out now.
So can we see any evidence? Have you got it on published anywhere of where you are doing this already?
We can give you examples of that, yes.
I think that would be really helpful for people to see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lawford, you've got 3 questions on local community. If you can answer those for us, please.
Hello. So the first question is, what are your timelines and when do you undertake? What are your timelines when you undertake any work? Well, just, yeah.
Timelines for work?
What are your timelines when you undertake any work, like in the local community?
I think I've got a bit more detail. I think if there's a leak, what's the timeline for responding and fix it? I think that was the context of that question that we've somehow lost. So I think when you get leaks reported, how quick do you respond and then complete the work to fix leaks? So it's a South West Water question.
So I'll answer some of these questions weren't in the few questions that came to us previously. So,
No, we do realise that.
So if we can answer, we won't answer them. We'll say that.
But you will hopefully you will answer them after the meeting, and you'll come back to us.
They're noted through the secretary.
They certainly will be. Yeah, they will be.
So yeah, we do have a service level agreement, but it will depend on the type and the size of it. So if, for example, you may have seen, start again. It'll depend on the size of leak primarily and the number of houses and households that it impacts. So if it's a significant leak, we will get there ASAP. We may not even ask for a road closure. We may even go in and do it straight away and look at getting the permissions subsequently from that. We did have a third party going to a quite significant size of pipe in Cornwall last year. We just had to go in and fix it without necessarily seeking permission because a number of houses that would have impacted would have been significant. There were probably locations where you would have reported a leak in a road and it will be a minor leak, and you're probably thinking, why have they not come round in the last 3 weeks? It's because we are focusing on those areas where we get the biggest impact back, i.e. the number of households that are impacted plus the amount of water that's leaking from the system. But if you go onto our website, you can actually see where all of the leaks have been reported to South West Water. Mark.
Yeah, just to build on what Alan's saying there. So when we get reports of leaks coming, we do a risk appraisal on those. We have emergency powers, so if there is danger to health and safety and life, then we go in and we do those repairs straight away. We have emergency powers to do that. But if it actually requires a road closure and we've got to come in, and so really it then gets into the complexity of the road closure and the planning that will be required associated with that. And in some cases, that can take weeks to plan, but in other cases, we can get in fairly quickly. We do have KPIs with our contractors that they actually repair those within certain time frames, and then we've got the actual closure by actually going in and finalising the tarmac, etc. So there are KPIs around all of those approaches, but ultimately it's that initial triage and risk appraisal of, is it something that we can do under our emergency powers, or do we have to follow through with road closures?
Thank you for that. Councillor Lawford, you've got 2 other questions? Not yet. Sorry, because...
So second question, house insurance does not cover pipes from home to the mains. South West Water provides insurance. How many households take up this insurance?
I haven't got
I think you'll have to come back on that one.
Yeah.
Won't
We
you?
will have to come back on that one.
Yeah.
So third question, South West Water's increasing bills, and what will this increase fund? what are your biggest challenges? Oh, wait. What are your biggest challenges, and will this increase help address these challenges? The increase in bills and the cost of living, what support do you provide to households struggling to pay their bills?
You go first. So we are, and we've set out within our business plan going forward, the most significant capital investment programme that we've ever seen, rising from about, well, it's doubling from about 1.4 billion up to 2.8 billion over the 5-year period. And in order to deliver that, and one of the primary areas of improvement there is the environment, both through storm overflows, and we've already talked about an £800 million programme on storm overflows, but then also a very extensive environmental programme with quite significant improvements in nutrients in rivers, particularly, and a number of other factors. So the environment is what's driving that scale of programme and that investment need. And our programme is going to be targeted at achieving those. We've challenged ourselves very hard around the efficiencies that we can deliver in the delivery of that programme to reduce that impact on customer bills. But it is such a significant increase that's required in order to meet the government targets that have been put in place, that is going to have an impact on customer bills. It's not something that we've wanted to do. It's something we've looked at, how do we minimise. But we've then looked at how does that work through when we recognise that we're in a cost of living crisis, and that already occurs. We have increased the support we put in place for customer hardship funds around that, and we've this year we've supported customers with £68 million worth of benefits around those funds in order to support customers who are struggling to pay.
Thank you.
Can I just say, there's lots of advice and information that's available to customers on hardship, etc., etc. Vulnerable customers, all of that information is on the website. I'll leave that here, but that will point you to a lot.
Thank you very much for that. All these questions will be sent to you, so that if you feel that you've missed something, that we can have the reply after today's meeting, and obviously early New Year. Councillor Dennis, you wanted to quickly come in?
Sorry, I may have misheard you. Did you say that a map of all the leaks was available on the website?
When you go onto our website, you can see where.
I can't find that, so if you could send the link through when you send the information, that'd be great.
You go onto the front page.
If you'd like to put your microphone back on. Sorry. It's easy. I always do it.
You go onto a website and it says report a problem. You click on that, and then it will take you to a map where the leaks are. Got it? Brilliant.
Right, Councillor Dennis, the question you have got is on farming. The floor is yours.
Sorry. I know you work with the farming community regarding the runoffs and the pesticides used, but I just wondered if you could elaborate on the work that you do with the farming community. I don't know.
So we do quite extensive work as South West Water through our upstream thinking programme, and we engage with quite a sizable element of the farming community, looking at how pesticides and nutrients run off from farmers' fields, and particularly if those are causing risks to drinking water and drinking water sources. So we work quite closely with that farming community, putting in place grants to improve how they manage runoff from their land and from livestock. So that's the primary purpose of our upstream thinking programme, is to work that closely and make sure that we reduce those risks.
Yeah, we are not in a similar position to other water companies. So there are some water companies that have drinking water protected areas or zones around, and there are some locations, and I won't say where, because it will not be fair for me to say where, that have high levels of metaldehyde, which is basically the chemical used for slug pellets. And what those water companies do is work with those farming communities around those reservoirs to change practices, because metaldehyde is very difficult to remove from drinking water. So ultimately you don't want it to get in the reservoir in order to pipe it down to take it out through a quite intensive drinking water process. So there are a number of places where we would consider that if that was required.
And I mentioned in my introduction, the Environment Agency has an agricultural regulatory task force, so they are focusing on the kind of poorer water quality status areas at the moment. But we do rope them into incidents that happen in this area as well, and we will go out and give advice and guidance. If that advice and guidance isn't followed up, then we will take enforcement action. I think one of the things I want to mention is what that team is doing. The majority of the time is advising on slurry storage. We have got a serious issue with that in Devon and Cornwall and Arsacili, and I would put that down to a main cause of most of the pollutions that are reported into us.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Monzo?
Yes, before I ask the question, in the decade between 2010 and 2020, and this is the source from the Exeter Observer, published last December, South West Water paid £1.1 billion to your shareholders, what your parent company, Pennon Group, end up 2020 and 2021 with a £3 billion cash surplus, and they paid £2 billion to the shareholders. Why do we have the more expensive water in the UK? Thank you.
First of all, over that time period, Pennon has owned a number of other companies, including Viridor, so it isn't all about South West Water from the Pennon elements there, so that's one thing. In terms of how does the water industry work in terms of funding, we have to borrow a lot of money to fund those programs to the environment. We've just talked about what the scale and magnitude of that is. When you borrow money from people, they expect a return, and that return is quite straightforward. Whether it's something you are borrowing from a bank, they will want a return on that. If you're borrowing money from shareholders, those shareholders also want a return, or else they will take their money and they will put it somewhere else. So the dividends we have paid are associated with those returns to those shareholders, and they are based upon that fact alone, because if you didn't give them the dividend, they wouldn't lend you money and you wouldn't be able to then fund the investment programs that we've got to do. So when you say returns to shareholders, it is the dividend that they are expecting to occur. Otherwise, they will take their money and they will go put it in a bank somewhere else that will give them a higher return. So when you talk about that, you need to think about, actually, this is about repayment for money that is borrowed. And that's the basis of how the programs are funded and how we borrow that money in order to be able to fund those programs.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Perswell, you have... did you have a supplementary? Sorry, I apologise. Sorry.
Are you aware that 83% of the profits of Pennon Group comes from South West Water? 83%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm aware of that fact. Yeah. But yeah, there have been other elements of the group as well. That is in the last year. Previously, you took a 10-year period. Then we had the Viridor group that were part of the group up till a couple of years ago, and that was also different in that point.
Councillor Perswell, you have got 2 questions on the climate change emergency.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Yes. Can I have a little question on that last one? I know.
Can you put your microphone on? I'll do it before they tell me.
Do you see private companies working better than nationalised companies with water? Because we see these vast sums of money. We hear about these vast sums of money. Are they more effective?
So I'm going to speak with some facts rather than emotion, because this is quite an emotive subject. Should it be privatised? Should it be nationalised? I think I've got it right way round. The current policy and the policy of the government back in 1989 was to privatise the water industry, which is what we currently have. I'll speak quite candidly now. I've grown up in the southwest for, I won't give my age, more than 50 years, and I remember swimming at many locations around the southwest where crude sewage was going into the sea. 60% of what we produce was going out crude into our oceans and our coasts. And only 28% of the beaches were meeting the minimum or higher standards at the time. Those standards have got tighter and tighter and tighter, and this year 99.6% of our beaches were either good or excellent. So that must say something about whether or not investment is right or wrong. The second thing I would say is that if there was a decision, and it's a government decision to decide whether or not how the water industry is regulated and governed going forward, but if it were to go back to national ownership, it would then have to compete with education, NHS, social housing, all of those things. So I think we just need to carefully consider what we want from a water industry, what outcomes we want, and maybe think about what the implications of either adoption of a privatised water industry or a nationalised water industry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my questions are on the climate emergency, which is ramping up even faster than the experts predicted. I'm interested in what data you actually use to address climate change and ensure the forecasts are valid, and how often actually are you looking at new forecasting regularly? Things are moving so fast.
So climate change is happening now. We're seeing the drier summers and the wetter winters, and the Environment Agency is monitoring every day. There's lots of different aspects that we look at. So we're monitoring salmon moving up rivers and seeing changes much quicker than we'd anticipated. We're doing flood modelling to make sure that our defences will have a 75-year lifespan or a 100-year lifespan. That modelling is constantly being updated with every event that happens. So when you see our community officers out in flood conditions, yes, they're talking to communities, but to find out when did this property flood last, can you show us some photos, taking that evidence and bringing it back so that we update our modelling ready for next year. That modelling is then used, and that intelligence is used when we get planning applications in, and we advise accordingly to what we're forecasting. But yes, it is happening quick, it's accelerating, and it's really important. I've also explained around how we're working with the water companies for the water resources side of things as well, and we make sure that we've got long-term plans in place to make sure that we're assured that the environment is safeguarded with that extra need and pressure on it for water use into the future.
Thank you. And what is your resilience, your plan dealing with the weather being much more unpredictable?
Well, I suppose we can't remove the risk of flooding, but what we can do is encourage local authorities to ensure that residents are prepared. And there's lots that residents can do. They can check gov.uk for being in the flood zone, know how to react in flood and how to plan, prepare, act, survive. And I think people getting used to living with that, and also thinking around communities that are at risk. If we can't reduce that, look at how we can adapt to it and consider what buildings are used for, what the safety associated with that is at the moment, because the Environment Agency is advising on new development and new uses rather than ones that have been there historically.
Sure. I'll answer from a South West Water perspective. So in our PR24 plan, which is currently with Ofwat, and we expect to hear initial indications of our plan in June of next year, there's a very clear commitment from us to be reaching net zero by 2030. And we're going to do that in a number of ways. Firstly, we're going to be doing that by offsetting, by planting trees, doing nature-based solutions is the first thing that we're doing. We're electrifying our fleet so that we'll be 100% electric fleet going forward. We've recently set up a new company in Pennon called Pennon Power, which is acquiring and increasing the amount of renewable energies that we have as well. And at the same time, we're also looking at what are the implications for climate change on our own operations. So particularly on storm overflows, what we're looking at is trying to take surface water, anything that's not sewage, out of the system. They're only pumping sewage around the system, because why would we want to pump 80% clean water when it can actually go back into the environment for the environmental benefit? So there's a number of things that we're doing, but I suppose the strap line to take away is in our PR24 plan, we've committed to be net carbon zero by 2030.
Thank you very much for that. I've got one question. I think you may have touched on it. The recent fines paid by South West Water to the Environment Agency, what happens to that money? And can local community groups apply for some of that funding for projects in our area?
So those fines went to the government, and the local area hasn't benefited from them. But there is change afoot in that area. So I think since the 14th of December, there are different enforcement tools that we can use. So we can make sure that we get that money back into the area. And there are examples where we are using enforcement undertakings. So that's where you look at the offence that has happened, assess the damage to the environment, and you look to get that money, instead of going to the government, into the local area. We work with Devon Wildlife Trust to make habitat improvements or whatever it is that that local environment needs. Sorry.
Thank you very much for that. Right, Councillor Steele, you have 2 questions on sewage.
Thank you very much. The first of these I'd like to address to South West Water. So, in 2022, according to the WaterFit data, there were 309 sewage dumps on the Erm. In the past 2 months, there were only 2 days during which there was no sewage dumps on the Erm. Ivy Bridge Overflow 2 has been spewing continuously since December the 4th. I've had a resident come to me quite incensed by witnessing sewage flowing through the centre of Ivy Bridge along the river. Now, you've given a target to decrease outflows to 10 by 2025 in 2 years' time. So I'd like to ask, how is that going to be reduced so much? And there doesn't seem to be any mention of system capacity so far. So what's your plan? This is really the question. What's the plan for increasing capacity for sewage treatment?
Okay,
to cut
so
down on
I'll answer that partly, Mark, and then if you can add to it. So it's not necessarily about system capacity. Ideally, what we would like to do, as I mentioned earlier on, is to take everything out that shouldn't be in the system. So what we need to do is remove very, very clean surface water from going into the system and only have sewerage in the system. If we only have sewerage in the system will cope. Unfortunately, what we found, and we have found this in a number of instances very, very recently, not here, is where a particular private industry redirected all of their surface water into our sewerage network, increasing the number of times the storm overflow operated. That's not right, because in effect it's not sewage, it's primarily surface water with a little bit of sewage in. So the first thing we want to do is take everything out of the system that shouldn't be in there in the first place.
Yeah. So can you elaborate, and how will that be done?
So we do impermeable area studies, looking at whether or not there are places within a particular location where we can either slow the flow or take the flow out. We look at areas where there may be excessive rain, roof drainage going into a sewerage system. So there's many things that we can do in order to reduce what's actually in the sewer network itself. I mean, suffice to say as well that it isn't right that our storm overflows are operating in the way that they are operating, but I think there are a number of solutions which don't include just increasing capacity. And I'll kind of come to Mark now to think.
Thank you, Alan. As Alan said, what we want to do is have that the sewer network is there for sewage, not necessarily for lots of other flows that are occurring. And we do find many occasions where there is land drainage and other things that have been redirected into the sewer network. Sometimes that's intentional, where things have been connected illegally in that sense. In other cases, it's runoff has come down a field into the highway drainage and into the sewer network. And so we're looking for where these opportunities are to redirect the flows. And we do find that we can bring flows down in the network quite markedly when these are found and removed.
So is there a
They do tend
timeline?
to occur a
Yep.
lot in very rural areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a timeline for this? Is that
So
2025?
So for there are some that we're working towards in 2025. There are others that we're working towards in 2030, and we are currently going through the processes of doing investigations. We put out monitors. We build hydraulic models, which are computer simulations of the network. We then test that with storm events, see what is entering the sewers, and then where we've got differences between what the monitors are telling us and what the model says should be occurring, we can then go and investigate what those causes are. In some cases, it literally involves somebody just going around lifting manholes and looking for where these things have occurred. We've got some really interesting stories of groundwater pumps being put in place in an old pub that are then pumping into the sewer network. They shouldn't be doing that. And there are a number of other things that we found of illegal connections over the periods as we've been doing this work. So there is a lot of that occurring at the moment. We are going out to quite a number of areas where there are high spills, and we're investigating all of them at this time to try and identify what is causing those issues. And then we're going to put rectifications in place to either redirect that water or actually stop it at source. And groundwater is probably the worst of all of the issues because yes, you can stop it entering a sewer or a manhole, but then the groundwater levels will rise and it will find another pathway, and we need to work out what that pathway is.
Okay. So the 2025, 2030 deadline, do you think they're realistic?
So as I described earlier, we've set out a plan for all. So there are 1,342 overflows in the region. 508 of them are already meeting the targets that are in place. So we need to invest in 800 plus overflows. Now, the government plan says we should be doing that by 2050. We've looked at that and we feel we can achieve that by 2040. So we have set plans out over the next 15 years to do all 800 of those overflows. We prioritise them based upon bathing waters and shellfish in the first 5 years because that's the key area that all of our stakeholders are telling us that the things that they want to be resolved first. And then we are looking inland and starting to address the inland ones over that time period. So when we publish WaterFit Live in early January, you'll be able to click on every overflow and see what date is associated with each and every overflow.
Can I just say we met with Councillor Dennis at South Milton last week, and one of the questions we had was on model doesn't accurately reflect what it should be reflecting. Can you, as local councillors or local community, give us an idea of where this might be occurring? And the two gentlemen that are with us, so we think it's between this point and this point. That's really helpful information. So we're now going to liaise with those local communities to work out whether or not something has happened that we weren't aware of, that we can go in and remove it from our system.
Thank you very much. Sorry, the second question. That's okay. It's a bit more for the Environment Agency, this one. So again, from public information, Mothcombe Beach is rated the 10th worst beach in the country by duration of reported sewage outflows along the Erm. So my question is, how can this be rated as good? It's the 10th worst in the country. And given this rating, are the standards fit for purpose? And just a little follow-up, given this is 2.14 million pound fine meaningful to try to address this when we have very large dividends as demanded by shareholders?
Yeah, so two questions there. So I did speak to my colleague who does the kind of bathing water side and the monitoring side of things, and the story behind the is agricultural. So the bacteria that you have on the beach that you've got a large amount of fresh water that's coming out, and the bacteria that comes through our monitoring is for agricultural bacteria. So the evidence is pointing that it's about land management, that issue there.
It is still sewage outflows, though. It is still the 10th.
There is sewage outflows there, but that is from that's from storming sewage treatment work. So it's very dilute with lots of that rainfall coming down as well. And the dates I think that were mentioned earlier on, it's been an incredibly wet autumn, and we need to anticipate that into the future.
Yeah.
With regards to the fine, the Environment Agency was disappointed that that case didn't go to the Crown Court. That's a decision for the magistrates, and we will continue to try to push for them to go to the Crown Court so that we can get the larger fines. But agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Eady, I apologise for you having to wait so long. The floor is yours if you still have a question that
Thank you. Yes.
needs answering.
And many of those points I was thinking about have been covered. Thank you. But I did, as a general point, as constituencies always bring up matters to do with bathing, and so thank you for answering those questions. Mine in particular is around the report from Ofwat last year about a lack of investment, which quoted saying extremely disappointing, especially in light of poor performance for customers and the environment. The regulator pointed out the sustained poor performance over a number of years. And so you say that you would rather use pounds, shillings and pence as a means of demonstrating your investment rather than percentages, but the public in general will be confused by volumes of 1 billion, or should it be 10 billion? So my question is, what level of investment is needed to achieve the shortfalls highlighted by Ofwat last year?
So the report that Ofwat published last year was a position that they are expressing around historic spend levels rather than future levels that are being projected. And they have highlighted for a number of companies in the industry where investment levels have not been occurring in what's known as capital maintenance. And that's the money companies are funded in the background to manage and maintain their assets. For South West Water, we are spending well above our capital maintenance allowances within this 5-year period. And so, that was a report that was around the industry as a whole. But actually for ourselves, we are spending those levels and maintaining our networks to achieve what is known as stable serviceability of our assets. We are seeing very significant levels going forward. And on storm overflows, as I said, we're projecting to need to spend something in the order of 3 billion in order to meet the new government targets that have been put in place.
So you mentioned earlier things like £1 billion, I think, over a 5-year period.
Yes.
That's reflective? So you're saying 3 is another further 2 is needed? Is it over the next further 5 years from that point?
Yes, 15 years overall. But that is the sum that we are projecting for storm overflows at this moment.
Just on that subject alone. So as a whole, do you think that you'll be able to meet those targets?
In terms of expenditure and delivery, we are projecting that we can deliver against that, and we have just announced recently another 15 supply chain partners that are going to be supporting us in the delivery of that over the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McKay, I apologise for you having to wait for so long. Are you still there?
I am.
McKay?
Thank you. No, I mean, most of my questions have been answered, but I do have a few remnants I'd just quite like to get off my chest. One of them is to do with the reservoirs. I mean, we are entering a period now of where we're likely to get very dry summers. And it's a bit disappointing that since privatisation, there's been very little investment in reservoirs. And I don't, could you tell me the last time a reservoir was built to service the South Hams and or indeed the South West? So that's one thing. The other, sorry, can I just shut the door? Just shut up.
Is that the wife or the dog?
Sorry.
What did I say?
Sorry about
I was going to answer the question.
She's been as quiet as a mouse all through this meeting. It's only when I turn my mic on she starts barking. Yeah, so there's that aspect of it. And we are entering it's going to be very wet in the winter, and it's going to be hot, dry summers. There's been a recent report published specifically for South Hams, which highlights this fact and how river flows will be reduced in the summer, and then which leads to a question of where there is pollution, it is going to have a much bigger impact due to the lack of water volumes in our rivers. And so the lack of any reservoirs and the forward thinking necessary, we need to really be thinking about preserving water and also building reservoirs. And I'd like you to answer the question about that. But the other thing is, just so I'll get it all out at once, the whole business of communities working with both the Environment Agency and water companies, and this concept of CSI, community science initiatives. There is an army of people out there that want to contribute, and given the scale of the problem that you are addressing and trying to model, my question is, are you using these people effectively? And the final thing, coming back to money, is the Environment Agency. This comes back to the CSI question, but the Environment Agency is very badly funded these days, basically, and hugely under-resourced. So I fully appreciate that they are struggling, but do the water companies fund the Environment Agency in any way to help them with their work? And if they don't, should they?
Before they come in and answer that, Councillor McKay, I'm old enough to remember that Harberton Ford was actually considered for a reservoir way back in the 70s. And I can remember going through your village on a regular basis saying, save our village, no reservoir here. So you ought to be cautious on what you're suggesting.
Well, I think those days are a long time ago. I think everybody would welcome a reservoir. Not necessarily, there'll probably be a NIMBY element to it, like there are to wind turbines, but nonetheless, it is a serious issue, and the lack of investment in these things over the years is now put us in a very difficult position. And I just wanted to understand what the water companies are doing to address this now.
Mr. Burrows, the floor is yours.
I'll answer this. Some of the questions very briefly. Rowford was built in 1995, following a significant consultation and NIMBYism about the fact that people didn't want it in that valley, they wanted it somewhere else. I mean, let's be honest, there is an element of we need to get the local landowners, etc., on board, but Rowford was built in 1995 as a result of our analysis in South West Water that we needed to secure further supplies going forward. I mentioned earlier on that we are securing additional supplies across South West Water area, Blackpool Pit, Hawks Tor, desalination at Par to manage peak emergency issues is the next thing. You mentioned wet winter weather, absolutely right. That's why we've applied to the Environment Agency to undertake what's called pump storage in wet weather, where we can take excess flows in the river and pump it back into the reservoir so that we can use it during the summer months. We already do that for Colliford and Wimbleball. We are looking to do that at a number of other locations in the southwest, and that has two benefits. We're not taking the water out during the summer, but we're also reducing the flood peak, which might mean that we can reduce flooding downstream during those flood peak periods. The other thing I mentioned earlier on is demand. So let's reduce demand that people have on water and water supply. And my analogy to this is, why don't you build a bigger radiator to warm your house up, Alan? Well, why don't I just close the windows first and insulate the house properly before I decide to build something bigger? So I think we need to do a number of things before we even consider building another reservoir or another big resource. Next thing is around connectability. We can move water around the region now. As Mark, my colleague, said just now, we are building a new reservoir in Cheddar. That will be part of a resource that we could use to move water around the system. That's the next thing. In terms of impact on pollutions in the drier weather, it's to suffice to say that when it's drier, pollution numbers tend to reduce, because it's the wet weather that actually causes the majority of the problems. If you remember what I said earlier on, if we can reduce the surface water going into our sewers, then we'll be able to reduce the pollutions as well. So it's all connected. The one around CSI, that's the system science. There is a project funded by Ofwat called Casco, which is looking at how we can use citizen science to improve our understanding of the environment. And the West Country Rivers Trust are one of the organisations locally working with Exeter University to understand how we can use that data. And then Mark's going to answer the final question on do we fund the Environment Agency?
We annually pay fees to the Environment Agency, both to abstract water and to discharge water back into the rivers through an agreed permitting mechanism, and that is reviewed every 5 years and is actually being reviewed in the new year. So there's increases to that occurring, which also then funds a lot of the activities with the Environment Agency. And not only does South West Water do that, but every other water company does that in England and Wales.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one? It's a bit of a trivial question, I suppose, but
can you be quick, Councillor McKay? Because we
yeah. No, really quick. I believe a statistic is that a third of the water domestically used is used for water flushing, toilet flushing. A simple thing to reduce water consumption and to stop extra water going into the system would be to use a grey water system. Are we encouraging, or are you encouraging domestic households? Because it's a fairly simple system to implement. Is this something that you are encouraging your consumers to do?
We do provide water saving devices. I've got 3 in my house. One is an egg timer, which is a 3-minute shower. I've also got water saving devices on my tap, which create an aeration in it, and therefore you use less water. I've also got a load of old bricks in my cistern. So instead of flushing 10 litres, I only flush 6 litres. So we can all do that without any grey water system. I think it's suffice as well. It's a planning consideration in terms of whether or not any new developments may want to consider this. So, you know, we would encourage you as a local authority to think very carefully around what you can do in order to manage demand going forward as well in terms of grey water systems.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to come in on that as well. So work with the community. We have a catchment-based approach. So in the South Hams, we have the Tamar Management Group and also South Devon Management Catchment Group as well. We have catchment coordinators that work with local communities and enable them to feed into water priorities, measures, and develop a pipeline of funded projects, because at the end of the day, it's the communities that know where the attention is needed. On the yes, how South West Water funds, permit fees is the way that they fund, and the question is around whether those permit fees are the right price, and that is being reviewed. The Environment Agency is considering having teams, because at the moment my teams are focused very much on all aspects of industry, so quarries, mines, water company, agriculture, but having a water company focused regulation team so that we can have a very much more consistent approach. But an increase in permit fees is being reviewed by Ofwat and Secretary of State at the moment, because if we get new teams, new officers, that costs money. That's from an increase in fees, and that ultimately can reflect on the water bills.
Thank you very much. Now we've got 4 more questions. I'll take it in turn. Sorry, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Perswell, you had a question to ask for your area. Have you already asked that question during the questions you've already raised, or is there? Are you happy now?
I don't.
You're okay.
Yes, I mean, just how low can your assessments get?
Microphone.
Sorry.
We've got South West Water trained.
It's because I'm next to you. Apologies. Well, I just wondered how local forecasts can get. I mean, when you talk about forecasting, are you talking about the South Hams, or can you really focus down to towns, villages?
Are you talking?
Is it in your interest to
flood forecasting, or?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Well, I'll give it a go. So we have data for the locations that flood going back many years. So we will continue to catalogue and use that in our intelligence systems, and then apply that to how planning is done. That's how we do it. And we do it as frequently as events happen. We will always go out and assess and gather evidence.
Okay.
In my previous role, I used to lead the Flood Forecasting Centre at the Met Office. So that's looking at bringing together hydrology and meteorology and looking at impacts on land. So the Flood Forecasting Centre on a daily basis looks at the potential of either surface water flooding occurring, fluvial flooding, river flooding occurring, groundwater flooding occurring, and or coastal flooding occurring. And they can go down to, at the moment, I think it's 5 kilometre square grids. The Met Office are getting in a super computer now to go down even to greater granularity. So as our computer system power increases, we'll be able to get greater granularity on that in terms of flood risk management.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Panel, you had one on the River Avon.
I do. More than half of the River Avon is in my ward of South Brent. Despite the assurance we've heard about how things are improving, in last year the number of discharges of untreated sewage at Dipford Treatment Works went up from 83 in 221 to 119 last year, and in March this year I was dismayed to see that the National Group of Wildlife Trusts named the River Avon as one of the sort of 20 rivers across the country to be named and shamed as particular risk from pollution. Pollution from human and farmyard sewage, or farm sewage I should say, pesticides and fertilizers which crowd out wildlife, promote the growth of algae, suck the light and oxygen away from plants and animals, and obviously cause illnesses in people. I really do think the Wildlife Trust Chief Executive described it as a national disgrace. I feel very ashamed that my beautiful river is being called a national disgrace. What steps are we taking holistically to improve the situation on the Avon?
At risk of repeating myself, I canoe the Avon a lot. I have a very soft spot for the Avon, and I do think that you can notice the difference in the years that I've been canoeing down it. It's that agricultural impact which isn't as bad as elsewhere, and with the resource that the Environment Agency has at the moment, we have to go to where that river quality is at its poorest to try and make recovery. Locally, I am looking to see whether our efforts are better spent on the good rivers, so that we can keep them good. And that's a matter of me having to influence nationally, because I don't have that power at the moment.
Thank you. Can I ask one more quick question?
Quickly,
very quickly. We've talked about the merits of nationalisation or privatisation of the water industry. Do you think the present system, whereby in the southwest water areas about 3% of our national population is paying to clean up 30% of our bathing beaches, is a fair solution to who should pay for what?
I have a view, but it may not be the view that Mark.
So I think this has been something that has been recognised by government, and hence there has been a £50 rebate that government has made to offset some of the costs that customers in the southwest are funding. That subsidy is still under debate as to whether that should go forward or not. So I don't know what the outcome of that debate is going to be, but I think that is the recognition that is the case. We believe that's still the case for South West Water, and we are looking at tariff structures around, well, how do we change that and how do we reflect that in different ways that customers could pay. And so, one of the debates is, should there be some form of tourism tax? Should tourists pay more, or businesses that are supporting tourism pay more for water that way to cross-subsidise what is actually being funded by residents? But that's quite a significant debate, and it certainly shouldn't be something that South West Water alone do. It needs to be a much wider debate in society around that balance.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Jackson, you have been amazingly patient. Thank you very much. Can I also just say how nice it is to see you back?
Thank you.
It's much appreciated, and we wish you all the best for Christmas. So you've been really patient. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a question first of all, I think for Mark or Alan. At Kingsbridge Town Council meeting last week or the week before, there was mainly the topic was about flooding and raw sewage being reported by the public coming up in Key Car Park and some of the surrounding streets. And one of the comments that came up about all the new development in Kingsbridge, and basically they feel that the pipework isn't able to cope with the amount of, sewage going through it. So I just wanted to know if you knew anything about Kingsbridge in particular and whether you had any plans to invest in new pipework there.
Yeah, so if my colleague Jay was here, he would be able to tell you exactly what caused that issue down at the quay. I think it was surcharging from the manhole, is that right? Now, don't quote me on this, but I think it was as a result of some ragging on our pumps. So wet wipes get into the system. It affects the ability for our pumps to move sewage from one place to another. And as a result of that, the sewage can back up and cause the manhole to surcharge. But we did a full investigation on that, and if we can make a note of that, I can give you the outcome of that investigation. It is, in my view, not related to any of the development.
Right. Because one of the councillors pointed out you've got lots of new customers in Kingsbridge now because of all the developments, so maybe some of your funding can go into servicing that. And my second question, actually, which I hadn't asked before, is that it's a personal one, but I've heard lots of on the radio, it's to all of you really, about how the level of pharmaceuticals going into our water supply. So A, do you drink tap water? And B, have you any way of filtering those out, like the estrogens and legal and illegal pharmaceuticals actually?
So we have very, very strict rules to comply with by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. The Drinking Water Inspectorate will require us to take samples at regular intervals, and where necessary, if complaints come through, investigate those thoroughly, and we will have to respond to the Drinking Water Inspectorate on that. If my colleague Chris Rocky was here, head of water quality, would say that we got one of the best water quality performances in the water industry. In the UK itself is probably the head of many other countries in the world. But that's not to say that there are some concerns probably around forever chemicals that need to be looked at, pharmaceuticals that need to be looked at, but more primarily, what happens if they get into the environment? Because I remember a project I did for the Environment Agency many, many years ago around the feminisation of fish, or the defeminisation of salmon and trout in the River Dart due to pharmaceuticals and the impacts on the environment.
So do you drink tap water?
Oh yeah, I drink tap water. It's cheap.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to ask one question for myself, if that's okay. I can see Mr. Molyneux dreading it. We met you last summer, as I said, down in Dartmouth at Warfleet Creek with residents. Can you, not today, but after, obviously in the new year, can you give us an update on the request for residents for Warfleet in Dartmouth becoming bathing water status? Totnes, obviously they've requested the same. Stoke Gabriel and also Dittisham, because those are areas that feel that they should have bathing water status. So I don't want you to come back today because we've run on long enough already, but if you'd be kind enough to come back. And one other one is, there's a reservoir which belongs to South West Water in Hill Head in Kingswear, that constantly overflows when there's too much rainwater, etc. A fortnight ago, it literally took half the road away. It has been repaired, but that really needs a long-term solution to actually solve it. I'm hoping that what you've done recently has done that, but if you could just feed back to me at some stage, please. Can I thank you very much for that? Is there anyone else that wants to have a quick question? Councillor Dennis, quickly.
Well, I did tell you about this question beforehand, so I'm not going to ask it quickly. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've been waiting patiently. So yeah, thank you. It was really worthwhile actually visiting the sewage treatment plants with yourselves, and I thank you for doing that. And I think both parties benefited from that knowledge sharing, as you pointed out earlier. So, so my question is, it is a very local issue, and it's really a hope that the Environment Agency might also take on board a bit more local knowledge when it comes to that particular South Milton outlet and where it ends up on the beach. And my aim for the day really is that while I've got Environment Agency, yourselves, South West Water and the District Council in the room, is to actually get a commitment to address this problem that residents have been coming to me and my predecessor for a few years now. So the South Milton treatment works outfalls into the stream. The stream then travels down to the beach, and it more often than not, recently pools because there is a sandbank that runs across the beach. So that water sits there, and in the summer, there are 80,000 people that visit that beach, and most of them will swim in that pool. On the Environment Agency's website, it says the South Milton stream flows across the beach. Well, that's not true half the time. The Environment Agency have monitored the stream between 1991 and 2008 and found that it does not affect the bathing water. Obviously, those dates are quite a long time ago now. I don't know if it's possible to show those pictures. I emailed you at the last minute, Amelia. No, don't worry, it's fine. Currently, the signage that's on the beach is produced, so the District Council have a responsibility to produce the Environment Agency's rating, I believe, which obviously just covers the sea, which has an excellent status. It says nothing about the pool area. And I appreciate the District Council doesn't necessarily have a responsibility to do that, but I would like to see some signage, ideally on the entrance to the beaches, that adequately warns people about not about swimming in that pool area. And I've been passed from pillar to post about who should be doing this. So if I can get some clarity on what we can do to actually sort this out, I'd appreciate it.
So when we met last week, we did discuss it, and I think I did provide clarity. It's not for South West Water to provide that signage. It's whoever the local landowner is, and I know it's very complicated. And I think you suggested there were 5 local landowners that needed to be consulted and asked whether or not South West Water would be party to that. It's not an issue for South West Water. We don't own the land, therefore it's not our responsibility. Therefore it's for South Hams, who are the public and environmental health body locally, to encourage the local landowners to put up whatever signage is necessary. We did commit, I remember, to provide you with some wording, which we haven't done yet because we're scouring to make sure that we get that right information. Related to the bathing water, that's a specific issue. That little pond is not the bathing water. The bathing water is a very specified area that's defined by a polygon on a map, which is what we also discussed. So I'll hand over to Clarissa, but I think we did cover it at the meeting last week, but this is probably for the record.
I'm afraid it's the same. It's the same as South West Water, which I think you know. We wouldn't be advising on public health. It's not our remit. I know that the Environment Agency is involved with it, but I haven't been personally, so I'm afraid I can't really add any more.
Can you get back to Councillor Dennis for us on that issue? And I'm sure you will, but maybe it's a South Hams environmental health issue. I don't know. Mr. Drew, would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think subject to ownership details and getting permission and some wording that perhaps we could receive from South West Water on, I would think it's something that we can probably cover in terms of getting a sign put there, subject to those permissions. Something around variable water quality, I would suggest, just to show that there may be issues. But we'll obviously have to check with the landowners in advance.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I've been reminded by Amelia, which I forgot dreadfully. We kindly asked members of the public to ask questions of your good selves. That question time to ask those questions was 10 o'clock this morning. We have 7 questions that we have been sent, but because the meeting has taken, rightly so, a little bit longer than perhaps some of us would have wanted, we will send those questions to you and ask you to answer those in the new year if we can. and then we can go back to those 7 residents with those answers, please. I would also like to.
Could I just make a few comments, if I may, please? A number of these questions we've answered before in constituency meetings. They're repeated questions, and I think it's right to say that a number of these have come up previously, and I suspect, unfortunately, no matter what our answer is, it won't be the answer that the residents want. But we've answered many of these before. But just, if I may, I think it's also helpful if we could have questions a little bit further in advance, because we have been caught a little bit on the hoof, and we've tried to answer as many as we can here. And just to finish off, if I may, I just wanted to answer the 2 questions I couldn't answer earlier on. One on leakage. We're currently around about 18% of our water is leaking through our systems, but we have a plan to reduce that. That's below the national average, which is 20%. And the other question around what percentage increase does that mean for bills? If you look at the average bills that are currently for this year, and this is an average, and that's why I don't like it, the average bill is 476. That's the mean, not the mode or the median, but it's the mean. If you add on the potential increases in PR24 for the first year of the new planning period in 2025, the average increase may be 7.5% on the bill. Okay.
Can I thank you for that? Can I just also say some of these answers, yes, questions you probably have already answered, but we're all here to work for our residents, and I know you work very, very hard. It's clearly obvious that you work very hard for our residents because you are so knowledgeable. But we are here to actually raise these questions. An overview and scrutiny has changed since the election, and we are trying to represent our residents more widely than we had in the past. I'm not saying there was any criticism in the past, because the past chairman sitting over there looking at me sternly, but that is what we're here for as councillors as well. So also, before we hang on, Councillor Dennis, we have also asked questions, or have had questions asked by Mr. Stuart Watts, Chairman of Bigby Parish Council, Friends of the and River Joint Parish Council Group. Those questions, I believe, have been passed on to you, or they will be passed on to you. And in the new year, if you'd be kind enough to answer those questions.
Can I just respond?
Of course you can.
We've spent significant amount of time, and my colleague Charlotte is with Bigby Parish Council, and we've answered those questions previously. Again, I suspect the answer we've given isn't the answer that they want. So I'm asking myself the question: at what point do we make a decision not to keep returning to the questions that have already been answered? Just if I could pose.
President will speak to that.
I think it is because we're obviously here, we're being streamed. This is for the general public, and these questions are important to these residents. They're important to us as councillors as well.
And to the wider area.
And I think that is why we have to again ask them. And we do appreciate you coming. I thank you very much for coming. Councillor Dennis wants to come back in. I apologise. I know I don't apologise for Councillor Dennis. I wouldn't dream of doing such a thing. Councillor Dennis.
Well, hopefully this will be a nice way to round off. Several times during the meeting, you've encouraged us as a local authority to implement new measures, etc. And I just wondered if there were any other suggestions you had that, as a local authority, we could be pursuing in your mind.
I would just say that real importance, which is in policy, on the importance of segregating out that surface water, because all of the high numbers of spills that you're mentioning is because of that deluge of surface water that's going through the system. So really applying that is really, really important.
The co-creation, co-development piece is at the heart of a lot of what we've got occurring in the £1 billion I've talked about on storm overflows. So we certainly do want that engagement, and we want that involvement. I recognise that can't be matched in terms of funding, but actually, and when we're looking at a lot of these things, it's about access to land, it's about routes, it's about opportunities to work together, and I think that's where the real value will come through that conversation.
final point, we did a really good conversation with Newquay Town Council last year and provided them with lots of material to help them manage communications with local residents and the tourists that came down. And there are some materials that we can provide that you can use locally, and we'd be more than happy to be part of a conversational partnership on that, because I think if you speak to Newquay Town Council independently, I'm sure they would say it was an incredibly helpful exercise to inform rather than educate, but inform people, particularly when they're visiting the area, because your behaviours do change when you're on holiday and you kind of drop your guard a little bit. You don't necessarily think about the things that you do at home, and therefore there are some really good materials that we can use to help you with those conversations.
Right, can I thank you very much again? Those questions will be in the minutes, and the answers will also be in the next minutes of this, or today's minutes for acceptance in, I think, February, our next meeting? January, I think it is. So, February. So thank you very much for coming. That's very much appreciated. We hope you have a nice Christmas, and I think we're all nearly there. And we apologise for you having to come on the 21st of December. This date was set a long, long time ago. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve.
Thank you very much.
Members, the next item was due to be building control, and we've lost the building control manager with IT issues. But Councillor Birch, do you want to come forward?
Councillor Birch, because we've lost Mr. Hunt, do you want to put this onto the next agenda?
Do you want the good news or the bad news?
sorry for holding you up.
No, the position is this: is that the reason I'm here is that I am one of the council's members on the Devon Building Control Partnership. The other is Councillor Mackay. Mr. Nigel Hunt, who is the manager of building control, unfortunately he started the meeting, but he got lost somewhere along the way. So what I would have preferred for him to be here in person rather than online. So what I'd like to propose is that this item be deferred to the next meeting, and that we ask Mr. Hunt to appear in person. What I was prepared to do, but I think presumably you would like to hold fire on this, is to give a background as to how we as a council are involved in the partnership. I was going to give some background to that, explain how we work with the other two local authorities, that's West Devon and Teignbridge. But I can perhaps save you that, as you seem to have I thought was quite a light agenda, but it seems to be a very heavy agenda. So I'd like to suggest that it be deferred till the next meeting, and that we invite Mr. Hunt to appear in person.
Councillor Dennis?
Just in light of what the request from South West Water that we submit questions in advance, I wonder if you could just give us a little heads up on your involvement, so that if we do have any questions for the following meeting, we can get them in ahead of time.
You've got 5 minutes.
I'm in your hands.
You've got 5 minutes.
I've got 5 minutes. I haven't prepared anything, so there we are. Okay, right. We as a local authority have an obligation, or I suppose, is it a statutory job? We have an obligation to provide a building control service. So what is a building control service? A building control service is that where we as a council are involved in the matter of building regulation applications and the administration of the supervision. No, supervision's too strong, but we have a watching brief on whether or not building regulations are complied with during the execution of building works. So that is the main function of building control. We also have other responsibilities, such as dealing with dangerous buildings, but that is more on the periphery as opposed to the main item of work. So a decision was taken quite a few years ago, and certainly before my time, that we as a council would work with two other authorities, that is West Devon and Teignbridge, and that we would form a partnership, which is called Devon Building Control Partnership. And so the three local authorities provide the service that I've just mentioned. The administration for the partnership is run out of Teignbridge. They're the ones who, where most if not all of the officers are based. They are responsible for all the administration. They organise the partnership meetings, etc. And each local authority has two representatives on the partnership. And as I mentioned, it's myself and Councillor Mackay, and then Teignbridge provide two, and West Devon provide two representatives. The board meets on a quarterly basis or thereabouts. The situation has been clouded over the years in that, and I don't remember when this happened, it was a while back, when the government at the time decided that in fact the administration of building regulations, etc., could actually be carried out by private organisations, and therefore there are competitors to our building control partnership, and the competitors are private companies who are set up to do the task that we as a local authority do. So, for example, what you find is that on large developments, the contractors like Baker will have their own favourite companies to do their building regulation supervision, and therefore I would say nationally, I'm not certain what the figures are locally, but nationally a lot of the building regulation work is carried out by private companies. However, we as a local authority, together with the other two local authorities, do carry out the building regulation function, and with it, because there is this private element, with it that creates problems, and the problem is actually recruiting, because we as a local authority or as a partnership have difficulty recruiting, and in fact that is one of the biggest challenges that the partnership is facing, is actually recruiting and retaining staff who are attracted by those who are operating privately. And I'm sure that will come out in Mr. Hunt's address to you. So as far as you thinking about questions for the next meeting, that will give you some idea as to the role of on the function of the Devon Building Control Partnership, and the issue and what is its main challenge. It's got plenty of work, but the problem it has is recruiting and retaining staff. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birch. Thank you very much for that. I think everybody's happy, and we'll have that on the February meeting. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good Christmas. You're watching, aren't you?
You'd be so lucky, Chair. Christmas past.
Yeah. Right. Item 9. Councillor Hopwood, are you still with us?
I am.
There she is. Looks like you've got a frost out there.
A what?
It looks like you've had a frost in the garden. Right, Councillor Hopwood.
In the garden? No. Sorry, can't help you there.
Right, Councillor Hopwood, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the last time you're going to see the KPIs presented in this way, or the KPIs that are here. In the new year, officers are going to be re-looking at what KPIs we present to members. There are only a few red faces or grumpy faces. I don't intend to go through them all individually because I did that last time when I introduced the item to new members. So I hope from the last time you can remember what they're all to do with, but I'm quite happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hopwood. Members, are there any questions? Stunned silence.
I guess just on the bins, I thought I heard bins were doing pretty well. Sorry. Yeah, microphone's on it, yeah.
Councillor Steele?
Just a question on the bins. I thought from press releases and things, bins were doing pretty well. There was, what, 0.4%?
Yes.
But it's a red face, so just a question about
yeah, it is a red face, and it is. Oh, sorry, I got massive feedback. And it is literally to do with the revamp of the range. Yes, it is very successful, but there that will right itself within the next couple of months. So those faces should turn smiley within the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, thank you. This is for a point of information. Page 31 is the employment estate occupancy rates. Just as a sort of point of information, the number of employment units, if I can call them that, that is administered by this council is 157, but that doesn't include the spaces at Follerton that are currently being let. So I just thought I'd mention that so you have some idea as to numbers.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Birch, and maybe that's something that if officers can pick up when we do the relook at what we present.
Councillor Eadie, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the one thing to consider for work for us to do, I think it will be certainly in the new year now, it is around. Am I right in thinking that these KPIs we can choose which KPIs we seek to find to want to have reported back to us, different themes and so forth as over time. So if we want to select different KPI metrics or different themes of which we want to hear reports on, it's in our gift to request that.
I mean, as an ONS group, the ONS group are able to ask for any information on anything.
Okay, yeah.
So,
exactly.
and you may well find that if you've got a specific thing you want information on, you may find that when this is, if you quickly send me an email about it, I'll find out whether it's going to, that particular thing is going to be on the new suite of KPIs. But if you want information on anything through ONS work programme, you can ask for those anyway.
Okay, yeah. So I think that
Thank
feels like
you.
something that us as an ONS committee can do in the new year. Thank you.
Fab. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Just going back to Councillor Steele's point about the bins. So Councillor Hawkins is right, and Councillor Hopwood are right about the changes to the collections. So we always anticipated it would get worse once we implemented a new system. There will be a report going to the executive, to the March executive, which is when we expect it to be all settled down, which will basically report it's been a success. We're now back to the level of performance we expected. That's what I hope the report will be saying. If that's not the case, I might not be presenting that report. But there you go.
Thank you very much for that. So if there's no other... Oh, Councillor Oram.
Thank you very much. Sorry, being the new boy on this particular committee, I'm sorry if I'm going over old ground. But just on that point there about the bins, are we, as a part of this report, going to be seeking feedback from the public about how the new system has worked for them, to identify any gaps in the new service? Maybe that was a question for Councillor Hopwood. I apologise.
Yeah, no, I can answer that one. I think as the that's not the job of the KPIs, but I think, and Councillor, sorry, Mr. brain freeze. There he is. There, Steve.
Hi.
Sorry. Molyneux, Mr. Molyneux. We'll no doubt that will be part of the exec report. A bit of feedback from residents, because I think we always need to listen to what our residents are saying, and that will definitely be taken on board.
Thank you for your clarification, Councillor Hopwood. Appreciate it.
Councillor Panel.
I was just going to say, as a slightly longer serving member of the council who went through the trench warfare of not 1990, not quite that old, 2019 and 20, I can tell you from the number of cases referred to me by my residents, things are an awful lot better. I think I've had 3 complaints in the 4 weeks since we started it, where I was getting sometimes 20 a day. So things are a lot better. And can I just pay tribute to the crews, because I happened to meet one of the crews serving my area last week, and I went over and had a chat with them. Delightful people, very committed and very conscientious. And I think the crews are doing the fact that we've included them and asked them for their advice and had teamwork with them to actually design the new rounds has really paid off.
Okay, can I thank Councillor Hopwood very much for the presentation, and Councillor Hawke and Neil Hawke for sitting in for the last 2 hours. So
29 minutes and 2 seconds.
And those are seconds that you'll never get back, Councillor Hopwood.
Well,
can I just?
I didn't come up for the meeting, but I got stuck putting for someone to feel sorry for me, putting a children's trampoline together, and I've still not put it together. And I looked at my watch and it was 1 o'clock when I was still throwing it around the garden or around the garage, and it's still being thrown around now. So apologies for not being there, but
Councillor Hopwood, you've been missed.
I doubt it. Thank you.
Can I ask the committee to note the key performance indicators for April 2023 to November 23? The intention to review some key performance indicators to provide more helpful information for members in the future. So everybody happy with that noting? Yeah. Item 10, task and finish working groups. Southwest Water research on the agenda today. Well, I think we've really gone through that really well. And I think that was a beneficial meeting with them. Sorry?
I'm still not happy about the answer that he gave me about the shareholders.
So we can talk about the task and finish now.
So now task and finish group. So Councillor Penfold, you wanted to come in?
Okay, so you have to imagine me as Councillor Cooper, okay? Because he's not here, so he should be leading.
Looking.
Oh, thank you. All right. Okay, and so the remit of this task and finish was to consider appropriate questions to put forward to the Southwest Water, and then we had the Environmental Agency in as well, and so that they would attend this meeting here. So the remit, I think, has been successfully achieved. So the question back to us now, the ONS committee, is are we happy with that, or do we need another subsequent task and finish to lead on from this, or is it closed now? So I'm going to put it.
Merry Christmas, ladies.
So that's my question. So through the chair to the committee, what do we want to do now?
Committee, what do you think?
So they mentioned about the PL24 plan, and I think they said a timing of June for that, but that will be finalised with Ofwat. So maybe perhaps we can scrutinise that. What do you think when that comes? Because that is, I guess, supposed to address all of these storm flow.
So we could perhaps put that on the working plan for maybe September. I'm looking at Mr. Molyneux.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of information. What the feedback they gave me outside was what they said in the meeting, which is a lot of the questions that they've had have been repeated from residents, and it's actually the same questions. I think the plan that they've presented to Ofwat, I think for me, is if that gets approved, it's the so what. So they've got their plan. They should be implementing it, and I think the question for Southwest Water in particular is, okay, you've had your plan for 6 months, come back and tell us what you've done, and are you going to be on track, and when will we see a difference? And for me, this is the benchmark of we've had them in now, they've given us pretty thorough overview, and I think the questions were really good. And I think the question is okay, so what improvements have you made since you came to see us at Christmas? And I think I'd give it 12 months before I'd gotten back, would be my view.
Mr. Powell?
Councillor Powell, thank
you.
you.
You wouldn't want to be a councillor.
No. How can I comment? No, I think the other thing I would say, there's a couple of challenges for us as a district council in terms of the planning system and so on. So I think if we, as officers, we can certainly look at those and see what we can or can't do through JLP review and so on in terms of ensuring, for example, we separate foul and surface water through planning process and so on. So there's something that I think we can take away and have a look at and work with them and then come back to committee at some point.
So is everybody happy if it comes back roughly this time next year?
Councillor, not the 21st of this year.
I think we should go for the 24th of December next year. Councillor Eadie?
Yeah, I think it's been summarised quite well, actually, but ultimately, yeah, it was quite a thorough discussion, wasn't it? And there's little point in having them back too soon. I don't know, in your experience, would it be a year or maybe more like 18 months?
I think more likely a year, but to keep them knowing that we're interested. Councillor Birch?
Yeah, you referred to me being a previous chair of ONS and sort of taking back, remembering the good old days, as they say. I really think you shouldn't let these guys off the hook. Yes, I think you've asked a lot of questions. They've given answers, and what's more, you can do it all over again because presumably it's on YouTube or whatever. And I think for you as a committee just to say, oh, thanks for coming along, thanks for asking questions, and we'd like you to come back in a year's time or whenever. I really do think if you do that, you're letting them off the hook. I think what you have a task and finish group. I think what that task and finish group should do, in my opinion, is to analyse where there are gaps, where there are weaknesses, or whether we as a council should pick them up on some of their answers and say, thanks for coming along, but these are the items that concern us, which we as a council believe need addressing, and we want you to come back in the near future, whatever it is. And I think we owe it to the people we represent. We've had these people here. We need to highlight our concerns from the answers or attempted answers, and take it forward. In other words, that gives some function to you as a committee as to, we sat through this, but we're not going to let you off the hook. I mean, that's me putting it bluntly, and I think my view is that is what our residents would expect and deserve.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Penfold?
Sorry. Can I just add to the comment that they made about the fact they're repeating themselves? And I understand that they feel that they're repeating the same information over and over again, but sometimes it's just to that audience or a small audience over there. These are things that affect all of us, and the more we can get answers about this and publicise this to the wider part of our community, I think it's really important. So, I understand that they feel unhappy coming back, but I think that's our job for them to come back, and it's their job actually to keep communicating with us as well.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. And just to finish on Councillor Penfold's point there, when's the cut-off for them answering the same questions again? Well, when we're satisfied, frankly. Yeah. And also, I didn't get a chance to comment on it, but I would have said, well, you'd be just hope that Devon County Council don't want to ask you questions as well. Otherwise, you'll be asking them all over again. I just wanted to finish by saying, of course, I'm the new boy here, but if there's any questions that any members were unsatisfied today, that needs to go back to the task and finish group for the question to be either a new question to be put forward or a current question reworded and represented with the findings that we were given today and the facts and figures that were presented, so that all members can feel satisfied that we have scrutinised them to their full. And then perhaps ask Devon County Council to have a go as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dommett.
Thank you. I think we need to do a further two things before meeting them in a year's time, and that's collating the information that we've gotten today figuring out what our questions are and what we're going to hold them accountable to, and then communicating that with them prior to them bringing them in a year or 18 months' time and saying, what answers do you have for us now?
I actually think by not giving them all the questions that we were going to ask them was the right way of doing it, because, you know, for those of us who have sat through their presentation at Dartmouth or in Totnes, which I did, you know, it was very glossy and it was all, they knew exactly what they were presenting. So I think what we did was the right way of doing it.
Well, I wouldn't, so maybe I need to reword that, in that we don't give them the questions ahead of time, but we tell them that we are expecting results to be shown, so that they are doing the work between now and then with some accountability, that they come back and tell us what has changed.
So, Councillor Eadie?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point's just been made. If we're going to get them back, we need to have some metrics or some sort of strategic point as to what it is that we're trying to ask them to repeat or to come back against. It's little point just asking the same questions again.
So,
what does this committee want to get out of
Mr.
the conversation with South West Water?
So picking up on all the discussion and Councillor Birch's helpful input, can I suggest that then we reconvene the task and finish group in the new year to come back and consider what they've and reflect on, or maybe if you've got nothing else to do on Christmas Day, listen to the whole meeting again, and then actually come back and say, okay, how do we want to take this forward? And then the task and finish group can then come back to the February meeting and say, following on from the presentation, this is what the task and finish group thinks the next steps are. If that everyone's agreeable with that.
So is everybody happy with that suggestion? Seems a good way forward. Yeah. Everybody happy?
Can I say something else?
Yes, of course.
The average cubic meter of water in the UK is around £483. The cheaper ones is in Northern Ireland, with that paying roughly just below the £400. We are paying £986, guys. That is double the average anywhere in the UK. And water, under the Constitution, is a human right.
Thank you very much for that. And perhaps you'd be a member of the task and finish group next time when we set up. Yeah, because I think that'd be a good, be very helpful. Sorry, Steve. I thought you wanted to come back.
No, the only thing I was going to say is when we talk about holding them to account, at the end of the day, they are private industry and we are a public body. And in actual terms of holding them to account, we can scrutinise them, but we can't make them do anything in reality because they're a private company. So I just wanted to make that point before we get too carried away with ourselves.
So the task and finish group will meet in the new year. Yeah. Okay. Right. The next one is a fusion. We need to have a chair for that group. I've spoken to Amelia on this, and I believe we have members from Ivybridge. We have members from. If you could just go through it again, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the people that have come forward to sit on this task and finish is yourself, Councillor Hawkins, Councillor De Winter, Councillor Dommett and Councillor Rake. Is there anyone else interested in sitting on this task and finish?
Now, I'm going to come back because I'm going back to Amelia for just clarification. To my knowledge, those members are, and I'm sorry I don't know all of us properly yet, and I do apologise for that, but we've got 2 members from the Dartmouth area. If you join it, you'll be the 3rd Dartmouth area, which is great. We've got members from Ivybridge. To my knowledge, we do not have any members from Totnes. No. And we did not have any members from Kingsbridge. Now, the leisure centres are really important for our residents, so I would urge members from those 2 towns to join, please.
Can I ask how many meetings there are going to be in the task?
Well, it could be about 500, I think. We're going to meet daily.
No, and
probably only about 2 or 3.
On Teams?
And they'll be online, they'll be on Teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll put myself forward, because actually it's quite a contentious issue in Kingsbridge. Because they were going to put solar panels on and now they're not, and I'd quite like to know why.
Oh, I'd like to know why that is as well, because I was the executive member when we put that through, so I'm surprised at that. I'm looking at Mr. Molyneux.
I don't know enough detail plead the Fifth Amendment on that.
I'm really surprised at that because
It's just we got asked about it in the meeting the other day, and just yeah.
That was money from Southampton Council. So I'm
not sure who
surprised at
funded it,
that.
but it was
All four
it was
leisure
part of the
centres were being
plan,
done.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got other members. Sorry, Councillor Eady.
Yeah, I as a user of Ivy Bridge, and I think actually these centres draw in from outside of the towns that they sit in. So yeah, I join the group as well if that's well received.
Okay. Thanks, and Councillor Perez as well. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so item 10, C. I know. I'm just going back to item 10C. I've numbered it C when you haven't numbered it. So yes. Planning enforcement. Councillor Dennis, would you like to just to do a brief presentation on your task and finish group? Thank you.
Yes, of course. It's obviously already been through the executive and through full council now, but just to report back to this group, myself as chair of the group, Councillor Penfold, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Long held 3 meetings with the enforcement officers, and I think all round it was deemed to go quite well. We put together a series of recommendations. The majority of those were concerned with communication with ward members and parish councils, but also we looked at the enforcement plan and an update on that. That was presented to the executive with the sort of caveat that it still needed to go through comms and design team due to the short time frame we had to conduct these meetings. It wasn't possible to do that before the executive. So it was agreed that would be finalised in consultation with the lead member for planning and with myself as chair of the task and finish group. And it was obviously passed at executive and then passed at full council as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dennis. Any comments on that? No? Okay. Going now to item 11, the overview and scrutiny annual work programme. Steve.
So looking at the work programme, Chair, we currently have Fusion on for the 8th February meeting. Bearing in mind the task and finish group hasn't yet met, and it's already got Sustainable Southams on, the Community Safety Partnership on, so 2 relatively chunky items, and now building control. Do we want to put Fusion onto the March?
I think that'd be a brilliant idea.
Agenda.
Yeah. Councillor Dennis.
My only concern with that is it's a very long time since we heard from them. So is it not more important that we meet them? And it is possible to conduct a task and finish group in a short space of time. We only had 3 weeks to do ours. So it's possible to be ready for that February meeting.
The only thing I'd say on that is we have got now a building control going on to the February meeting. And it might be a very heavy meeting. But
I guess it's a case of which is the priority, which is more important. I mean, how long is it since we saw Fusion? And they're supposed to give...
I think over a year.
Over a year, yeah.
And they're supposed to give biannual reports?
I think they used to give an annual update, and I think there was a request then for it to become more
asked for
frequent.
it to 6 monthly. So we haven't met them for over a year. Councillor Birch?
Yeah, I think, in my view, I think it's important that you meet Fusion sooner rather than later. I think there are issues with Fusion that hopefully may be teased out when you meet with them, and it may answer some of the questions that have been put on the matter of Fusion. I mean, as far as building control is concerned, I mean, quite obviously, you know, that is important, but it can probably wait a little bit longer than Fusion.
So shall we suggest we put building control back to March, and then we have Fusion in February?
That's
Councillor
your decision.
Penfold?
I was just going to say, is there something else that we might bump?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that Fusion come along. I agree, probably building control can wait until March. And then I think we go with Fusion, Sustainable Southams, and the Community Safety Partnership, if I'm honest.
Councillor Jackson, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was going to say about March for Fusion. Actually, I'm not sure whether we need a bit more time to sort of, if we're going to set up a task and
what we
finish.
could do with Fusion, we could try and go back to the 6 monthly one, which I think is needed with Fusion personally, and to have actually gone over a year is, in my view, slightly concerning. Councillor Domit?
Do we know if there's anything that we need to be addressing with Fusion?
I mean, I find Fusion very, very, when I have issues in my patch, they come back very, very quickly. And I had a meeting last week because there was issues over opening hours, and the meeting was set up within a few days by John Parkinson. So, I mean, you could always do that outside, and just as councillors. Steve?
Up to members, ultimately. You let us know.
Yeah,
Councillor Birch, and then we.
What
Sorry.
the task and finish group do?
Yeah,
Fusion?
I know you have a Fusion task and finish group.
What,
I mean, can we just say? Can I just? In the past, there has actually been a Fusion task and finish group, but the way that operated is that it then went and visited all the leisure centres. That was the first thing: to visit the leisure centre, identify those issues that required attention, and then take them forward. So, I mean, as far as I think there's operational issues as to cleanliness, etc., etc. But I think there are greater issues than that, and it's a matter of what is the task and finish group's task? If it is to visit all the leisure centres, can it do that before Fusion come to the next ONS, so that it comes to ONS with a list, right, we have visited all the leisure centres and these are the issues, Fusion, what are you going to do about it? So in other words, that could be put to Fusion. Or is that, if it's going to take longer than that, then perhaps you see what Fusion have got to say at the next meeting, and then decide from that, from what their answers, as to the extent of the duties of the task and finish.
I think that's a very wise suggestion. Very wise suggestion.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. So some members, well, absolutely, yeah, which is some members of the committee, so we've got new members of the council, who have not experienced a presentation from Fusion, hearing what Fusion have to say, and then convening the task and finish group to say, well, actually, are we happy with that? Do we want to do? I think is probably the right approach. So can I suggest, members, that in terms of the other items, that we just go back to the chair and vice chair with which one we drop, and let the chair and vice chair make that call?
I think to actually try and do a task and finish group before the February meeting isn't doing the leisure centres justice. So I really do think that we have the meeting with Fusion, they come and do a presentation, members can actually hear them, and then we have the task and finish group from that. Is everybody happy with that suggestion? Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right, thank you very much. And I think, if I'm right, that we've got to consider. The leader of the council has asked that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee give consideration to undertaking a review into the local lettings policy. Amelia will send. Do we agree to set up that group? Yeah, everybody's happy with that. So in the new year, Amelia will send requests out for those who wish to become part of that task and finish group. Okay. Mr. Molyneux.
One other item. Mr. Powell confirmed that the item in red that you raised at the beginning for the executive forward plan is in fact moved to the March executive meeting, but will still be happening. So just for the clarity of the minutes.
Right, and on that, can I thank you all very much for giving the 21st afternoon up when you should have been doing Christmas shopping or going out with your family. Can I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. Take care. Hope you have a great time. And we'll see you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Eady.
Thank you. Have a great Christmas.
I love the hat.
Yeah, I've got a series of hats here I was thinking about putting on.
Which donkey did you pinch that from? Oh, he's gone.